Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Death Checks. This is our 15th show. I can hardly believe it. Patty, my wonderful co-host, and I'm Misty Lynn. And the reason we're doing this is because what is death? What does that really mean? Is that an ending, or is it the ending of something and the beginning of something else? So we're exploring these questions, and if you're here, I want you to give a big pat on the back, because who watches a show about death? Like, what's going on there? So we're really thankful for our viewers who have the courage to come out and listen. And if you're a repeat viewer, you know that we're here and we have fun and we laugh and we look at all sides. We judge nothing. We look at everything. Our topic of late has been the other side and the afterlife. And part of the reason I think people are afraid of death, and there's this dark cloud that surrounds death, is because it's such an unknown. The other side, what happens after, is so unknown. Many of our guests during round 2 have been talking about this, and Patty and I and our guests feel that when more of the world understands what happens on the other side, and we're getting lots of news that it doesn't stop when the body dies, that this will help alleviate some of the fears associated with the death, the dying of the physical body, which is what we seem to be getting messages about from all our wonderful interviewees. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing, everyone who shared our show. And I'm going to pass it over to Patty, and Patty will introduce our wonderful guest today, Mary Grace.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm Patty Burgess of Doing Death Differently, one of the Death Chicks, and thank you, Misty. We are here talking about death and talking about traditionally taboo topics. And today, this topic is especially of interest to me, and I'm sure it may be for those of you who have ever had to balance your faith, your religion, and a direct knowing or a direct experience of something that is paranormal. And that's what our guest has had to juggle in a way that, had turned out to be initially probably a very scary prospect and a very sad prospect, because it changed her relationship with her church. It transformed it, but it also opened up some other doors. And our guest today is Mary Grace. I want to introduce her. Hello, Mary Grace. Welcome. We're glad you're here. And I'm going to give you a proper introduction, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what started you down this path. And if you noticed in the show notes or in the about our guest, we talked about our guest being of the Catholic faith, and she was excommunicated as a result of a paranormal experience, which, I think for some of us, these paranormal experiences, when they happen enough, they start to be really, really normal. And in this case, this was a communication from her mother, and that communication changed everything with her relationship with the Catholic Church. So we're going to talk a lot more about this, but let me tell you more about what Mary Grace is all about. Mary Grace is a parapsychologist, spiritual counselor, and founder of Gifts of Grace Ministry. She provides workshops and inspirational talks on supernatural, mystical, paranormal, and near-death phenomena. She's got a BA in psychology from the State University of New York at UNESCO, and is also a retired mental health professional. She's trained as a medium in Lilydale, New York. If you're at all familiar with Lilydale, New York, it's a spiritualist community made up of all mediums. I was there a couple years ago. It is beautiful and wonderful, and the place is abuzz, let me tell you. And she also trained with the Plymouth Spiritualist Church in Rochester, New York. She's a member of Spiritus Christi Catholic Church in Rochester, and is a member of the International Association of Near-Death Studies. She's also the author of the book, The Communion of Saints, Talking to God and Grandma. She also conducts spiritual programs and lectures nationally. One of the things she likes to tell us about is that she lives on a 6,600-acre state forest. She is as remote as Misty is, only Misty's in the Arctic, and Mary Grace is surrounded by trees. I'm just out here in the middle of Philadelphia with all of that energy coming at me. and that's in the Finger Lakes region of Western New York. And she shares a home with her husband of 34 years, her 2 cats. Well, actually 1 now because we lost Stinky. Apparently, you still have Mercy and Stinky. But Stinky did pass on, and I'm sure you feel her around you still. Anyway, we're going to tell you all about where to get in touch with Mary Grace and her book, but I want to introduce her now because she's got a very important story to tell. Welcome, Mary Grace.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I want to thank everyone who's with us today, but I especially want to thank Patty for giving me, and Misty, for giving me this opportunity to share my passion for the paranormal.
Well, and it's important, and why I think your story is so much, I can't say more important than anybody else's, but it's about that that collision, in your sense, I guess, a collision of faith, direct knowing, experience, and religion. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about how this whole thing started? You've been a practicing Catholic, from what I understand, for all of your life, 40 years in one church, and then you were told one day that it's time to leave and that you were dealing with evil. So why don't you take it away and tell us how this whole thing started and how you got on this path?
Okay, we'll get right into my first paranormal story. Yeah, it all started 2 months after my mom passed away. She came to visit me. And she came in what is known as a visitation or a dream visit. I like to use my hands a lot, so you'll see me using my hands. And what happened is this. One night, while I was sleeping in my cozy waterbed, I thought I was dreaming. At least it started out that way. And in this dreamlike state, I found myself in my old bedroom in the house that I grew up in. And I was surrounded by all these boxes. And I understood that these boxes contained my mother's belongings because they had all been packed up after she had passed away. And as I was standing there amidst these boxes, all of a sudden I saw this woman who looked like my mother bend down. She reached into one of the boxes and she pulled out 2 lit candles, a white one and a blue one. And she handed them to me. And I thought to myself, how odd to have lit candles packed in a box, right? And I took these candles and I turned around to set them on a dresser that was behind me. And as I turned around, it dawned on me, well, that woman can't be my mom because she had passed away. So it must be an illusion, and I'll just blink my eyes a couple times, and when I turn back around, she'll be gone. I turned back around, and there my mother remained. And I said to her, Mom, it can't be you. You're dead. But as soon as I said those words, I knew, in fact, she was very much alive because she looked so young and healthy and beautiful, and not at all the way she looked when she passed from cancer. Well, my next reaction was to scold my mother. I said to her, Mom, where have you been? I've been waiting and waiting to get a sign from you. And she smiled this beautiful smile and simply said, I'm here for you now, Mary. And with that, I just threw my arms around her, and I held her close and tight, just so full of joy. And I could feel her very solid and very real. And the next thing I know, I was sitting in her lap, and she was rocking me back and forth. We must have been, all of a sudden, somehow I was in a rocking chair, sitting in her lap, holding her so tight. And as I sat there and she rocked me, she began to stroke my hair and said to me, everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be all right. And I knew that this was no dream. And in hindsight, looking back on it, how odd to be a 40-year-old woman sitting in her mother's lap, being rocked and held, right? But at that time in my life, I felt more like a 4-year-old little girl who needed her mother. And she was there for me, to comfort me and console me from beyond the grave. And in that moment when she was holding me, I just tears started welling up in me. I started crying, tears of joy, tears of grief, tears of release. But all that mattered, that I was with my mother. That's all that I cared about. But my tears, I soon started sobbing. And the next thing I knew, I awoke in my bed, still feeling the presence of my mother around me, still feeling her arms holding me. And I'm sobbing and crying now. I wake up my husband, who's next to me. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" he says. "It's Mom. It's Mom. She's here. She's here." And then this realization, she's alive. She's alive. Oh my God, Mom is not dead. Now, it's one thing to be raised believing in life after death. It's quite another thing to experience it, because this changed the course of my life. I vowed that day to do whatever it would take to maintain that relationship with my mother and to somehow learn how to communicate with her, because I knew if she could take the trouble to communicate with me that she was still a part of my life, I knew our relationship did not end with her death.
So you know what, Mary Grace? Unbelievable, the way you describe how real this was. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning that a belief is very different than a knowing. You apparently had a knowing. And this knowing, when it is that deep in your bones, can't be taken away no matter what. Yet my guess is that it tried to be taken away by some people, some clergy. And can you share what happened when you went to talk to your priest about this? Because that's who you thought you would go to. That's
yeah. What happened next is I started reading all these books about how to spirit communication and how to develop my psychic ability and meditation. All the books I read said the key was to meditate, meditate, meditate. So I took up meditation and did these exercises in books and found out, one day I was doing a meditation. I thought, well, geez, let me try and get in contact with Mom. And lo and behold, the same thing happened all over again. I was like taken to this park bench in a garden, and next thing I knew, my mother was there. Same thing all over again. I hold her, I cry, and everything now. Same experience, only this time I wasn't sleeping. I was meditating. I was conscious. I initiated the contact. And to me, it wasn't that hard. It was like, just simple meditation and all this stuff. I tell people it's a lot easier to communicate with your dead relatives than it is to learn a foreign language like French or Spanish. It's really, telepathy is our first language. It's an innate part of us. So I just I opened this door and I was confused. I didn't know how to deal with it, because soon other spirits started wanting to communicate with me. I had started having what I call unsolicited spirit communication, something I did not expect. So I didn't know how to deal with it, didn't know where to go. Small town. I didn't know any mediums. I was not on this path at all. So I went to the one person I thought I could trust and who I thought would understand. I went to my priest. Set up an appointment with him. And to me, this was a very scary thing to have a meeting. I'd never done that before. to see this priest in his office and everything. You know, it's like you're going to meet God. And and so I did. I went and I talked to him, and he listened very carefully and very politely to my experiences. And just to throw one added thing in, I also had a near-death experience, so that was a lot of other supernatural things that confused me. And at the end of the conversation, he explained to me very clinically that what I experienced was probably the side effects of the drugs and alcohol that I was on, because I was at that point an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I was probably suffering from some psychotic delusions, and that I needed to see a psychiatrist. And finally he said, you need to find another church, because what you're doing is dabbling with the devil and is evil, and you just need to find another church. And I went home from that meeting devastated, and I just sobbed to my husband. I mean, I was devastated. Small town, you know, everyone's related to everybody else, been baptized there, and my first communion and confession, married, the whole 9 yards, and now I wasn't supposed to go to church there. And at first I was upset, but then I got mad. I was like, okay, I've been going to church here for 40 years. At that time, he was a new priest, had only been there for 3 years. This is more my community than his. So I got mad, and the next Sunday I went to church anyhow. I said, I'll show him I went to church anyhow. And he acted very cold to me, wouldn't shake my hand during the sign of peace. And the next day, a sheriff showed up at my workplace and said, I think because I worked right in the town near the sheriff's station, Livingston County seat, and he said I was ordered to not set foot on church property ever again by orders of this priest, and if I did, I would be arrested for trespassing. So I was legally excommunicated from my church, and it was a very devastating thing, because it wasn't just a church, it was a community. It was a town that I was born in, and I felt like, after that, I felt like I was wearing the scarlet letter when I walked around town and went to the store, because only my letter was U for unacceptable, because I wasn't good enough to be a Catholic.
You know what's interesting too, Mary Grace, that is a hard thing to reckon or to square, in my opinion, is that all the teachings of every faith is that there is eternal life. Yet talking to this eternal life was problematic. How did you ask any of those questions at all when you were speaking with them, and how we are to believe in an afterlife, but a direct experience of that was somehow problematic?
No, I was just, you know, at the time when it happened, I tell you the truth, I didn't even know anything about mediumship or spiritualism. It wasn't even in my radar until after my mom died. I didn't even know it was against the teachings of the church to talk to the dead, and I never even thought about it, to tell you the truth. I did have a background in parapsychology, but they had more to do with, you know, experiments with the living. ESP and that type of thing. But no, I didn't. It wasn't until I had these supernatural experiences that I learned that it was against the faith and that it was taboo. And then I raised this huge question that I didn't know how to reconcile. And my question was, I spent 7 years researching and writing the book, is if we can talk to God and the saints in heaven, why can't we talk to Grandma in heaven, or Mom, or Uncle Joe, or whoever? So I spent 7 years asking priests and mediums, and I only interviewed mediums with a Catholic background, former nuns and priests, that very question, to ask them about the communion of saints. And what's up with that?
What's up with that?
Yeah, so what is up with that? What was your findings? What answers were you getting?
Okay, well, what I found through all my research was that there's a huge contradiction in the teachings of the church. On the one hand, they teach that about the communion of saints, and I can give a little definition of that in the minute, but on the one hand, we have this church doctrine saying that we can communicate with the saints in heaven, And
they're all dead, by the way, right? They're all dead, by the way. I said, who are all dead, by the way.
Yeah, well, not necessarily, because I'll explain that in a minute. But on the one hand, you're not supposed, you can talk to the saints. On the other hand, you're not, you know, we have this relationship with the saints, but we're not supposed to talk with them. Although we pray to them all the time. Like when we lose something, you know, you pray to Saint Anthony. Tony, look around. What was lost must be found. You know, a lot of people know that one. But they're not supposed to talk back. And we're not supposed to initiate it. So I found that there's this contradiction in church teaching, because basically spiritualism, communicating with non-physical beings, is the foundation of all religions. And in the Catholic Church, it's taught under the doctrine of the communion of saints. So it's just a Catholic term for spiritualism. And
I want to make a note here that your faith is still very strong, and you do go to a Catholic church.
yes.
But it's a different kind of Catholic church. And I do want to hear more of that story, but I also wanted to mention this is not Catholic or religion bashing in the least. It's to show where, even within their own doctrine, that there are some controversies and some contradictions, as you mentioned, and you went about uncovering them. So,
and the whole point of my research is to use the science, bridging science and religion. I use the science of parapsychology, and science can help support and bolster our religious faith and help us to understand, for example, the person of Jesus and how people can have these abilities to multiply loaves or telekinesis or walk on water, you know. So this is, and you know, Jesus himself said we all have these abilities, even the least among us. So to understand our faith in context of the physical and scientific world we live in is important. And I have a little topic when we want to talk a little bit about bridging, you know, science and religion. I can talk about that.
absolutely, absolutely. So, as you go on now, you're sort of a Catholic without a home, so to speak. But my understanding is that you begin to find some people, and I am curious when you said you interviewed Catholic mediums, because they too had to go find some way to reconcile their faith and their mediumship. Did they not?
Well, this is the sad thing, that most people cannot reconcile it. If they find they have spiritual gifts, they ended up leaving the church. So all the mediums I know, and I interviewed many in Lilydale, they were the Catholic background, like I said, former priests, former nuns, ended up leaving the church, many ostracized by their own family members that won't speak to them. And there was so many sad stories, and I'm like, but why can't I have both? Why can't I be a spiritualist and a Catholic? And I just want to clarify, I do have a home, a Catholic home. It's my church, Spiritus Christi Church, made up of several thousand people. It's a community, and we have outreaches all over the world. So I do have a home there. It's just called an ecumenical Catholic church or independent church. It's not under the auspices of Rome. So I'm a Catholic. Catholic means universal. I talk in my book about what it means to be truly Catholic, is in the teachings of Christ. You know, there is no religion, but I'm not, you know, I don't consider myself, and I am not a Roman Catholic. So that's kind of, you know, a little confusing for people. There's over 50 denominations of Catholicism, by the way.
Very interesting. Speaking of that, can you give the difference between the Roman Catholic Church and the church that you're involved in?
There's a Roman Catholic Church, and there's what they call the Orthodox Catholic Church. Getting into the history of the church, it's fascinating. If you're into history, a lot of people aren't. But, you know, from the time of St. Peter, the beginning of the Catholic Church, for many years, it was just one church. And then Rome split off in what they call the Great Schism, and that's when it was run by a board. The Bishop of Rome declared himself infallible and equal to God. So now you have two main portions of the church, the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Catholic Church. The Orthodox Catholic Church, they still practice spiritualism. They don't have a problem with communicating with the dead. The priests still marry, and so there's some differences. The Roman Catholic Church has to recognize the Orthodox Church. They don't like it, but they do. It's because they both have what they call apostolic succession. They came from the same roots. We have women priests in our church. Many women now are being ordained as priests, and you know there are kind of some renegade bishops out there that are ordaining women that want to be priests. They should be able to practice as priests. They can't in the Roman Catholic Church, but in the ecumenical Catholic Church, the greater Catholic Church, you can.
Very, very good.
Mary Grace, I'm wondering about the inner game that went on and what happened to you internally when you were excommunicated from your church, and then what moved you from that place of probably feeling quite a huge defeat, and like you mentioned, you were walking around with this big axe, or unwelcomed and in a small community, and just totally been ostracized and told by the law you're not allowed to go. And how did you move from that place to exploring, to confidence, to writing a book, to doing the work that you're doing now? Because that's a big internal, it's a big thing to deal with.
Yeah, well, it's funny, I tell people I'm still in the closet very much in the area where I live in. In one way, I'm blessed to be living where I do in such a remote area. I was led, as most people are, I was led to the Spiritus Christi Church, downtown Rochester, New York, so found myself driving 45 miles to church every Sunday. I was led to a spiritualist church in Rochester, to learn how to develop my gifts, actually learn how to shut them down and control them. And I was led to Lilydale. So when I started meeting like-minded people and people that, and I read a lot of books about near-death experience and people that had their own experiences. So that itself gave me confidence. Wow, these people helped me by sharing their story. And this is a way for me to be able to, I wanted to reach back into the place I basically got kicked out of to go back and teach people what I know. I'm not physically able to go back to Roman Catholic Church, but I thought I could do that through writing and writing a book about my experiences and hopefully reaching, and not only people that are still practicing Catholicism, but all the people that have been abused and ostracized from the church, discriminated against, and they're basically recovering Catholics. And a lot of them just are angry and left the church. But I do have one story that I love to share. I have this one friend who's a former nun in Lilydale, and she told me this story. I hope this doesn't get out in Lilydale. She told me this story where when she first came to Lilydale, she would sneak in as a former nun, and she didn't want anyone to know that she was going to the spiritualist community. Well, then she became a part of the community for many, many years, still had her Catholic beliefs, but, didn't really do anything with them. After reading my book, The Communion of Saints, she says she started finding herself sneaking out of Lilydale to go to the Catholic Church down the street because she didn't want anyone to know. But, so why is that? Why are we sneaking around? Why do I have to hide the fact that we're talking with our dead relatives or going to a spiritualist church or a Catholic church? It's my Catholic part of me, is all part of my spiritual makeup. We all, some of us practice yoga or Reiki or your spiritual counselors. We have all these things that make up our spiritual being. Religion or spirituality, my Catholicism, is just one small part of me. I could call myself an expanded Catholic, as a friend of mine calls herself an expanded Catholic, and I like that.
I just want to bring up our viewers. It sounds like a few of our viewers were disconnected just for maybe 3 minutes. So we apologize for that. I don't know what's happening out there in the Google world, but Patty and myself and Mary Grace have been here and enjoying each other's company, and I apologize if you were bumped off. And I want to share something. John Jerkowitz, he's I just show his question. He has a question. He's wondering, did the Catholic Church officially excommunicate you? I know the police came to your door, but I think that's an interesting question. What's that question, John?
Well, okay, I'll answer that. There was no official thing that went through the channels of the church. And in the same way, the church I go to, Spiritus Christi, the priest that started that was asked to leave because he was serving communion to anyone that wanted to, and he was blessing gay marriages and that type of thing before they were legal. And what happened is they formed their own church. They were ostracized or basically told, you can no longer be a Roman Catholic. So the priest, along with over 1,000 parishioners, left and started their own church. And as soon as they started up, the response from Rome was, anyone who attends Spiritus Christi Church can consider themselves excommunicated. So from that point of view, I was not only excommunicated once, but twice, not only by the legal authorities, but then again by Rome when they declared anyone excommunicated who goes to the church. Now, the interesting thing is our main priest, Father Jim Kalin, explained to me, I was just reading this, it's in the book too, is they don't consider themselves excommunicated. They said, we cannot excommunicate ourselves. In the same way, you could not give yourself a speeding ticket. You simply don't have the authority to do so. So that's interesting. They don't. So a lot of times priests, like Roman Catholic priests, will come to our service for one reason or another just to check it out, or, and they come incognito, or they're afraid of being excommunicated. But through the proper channels, no. There has been no official excommunication, although there has been official letters and proclamations from the church.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting how fear can run this thing. As an example, you had mentioned something about a priest that you know that started an urban ministry caring for homeless and I guess any other people in an urban setting that may have other kinds of views or experiences or lifestyles. And I found it interesting that you said that somebody was excommunicated from a Catholic church for serving grape juice instead of wine at the Mass.
Yeah, that was exactly, it's the same priest, Father Jim Kalin,
Okay.
Who started, him and Mary Rammerman began Spiritus Christi. But what happened is Father Jim was the one who was given this rundown church in Rochester, in the heart of downtown Rochester, that he was fresh out of seminary school, and this is what you get, and he just opened the doors and let anyone that wanted to come to Mass and give them communion, and a lot of them were homeless people. Rochester has a huge gay lesbian population, and besides the unwed mothers and the divorced, and let anyone come that wanted to, and built this thriving community and built it up to several thousand parishioners. But they started serving grape juice as an alternative to wine because there's a lot of people that were recovering alcoholics, and that was one of the things that got them in big trouble with Rome, along with allowing women to serve on the altar and actually touch the communion. So that was one of the reasons that they ended up getting shut down, was because of serving grape juice and giving communion to anyone that wanted it, and allowing women on the altar.
It's so funny because I think about our church, and as I think I mentioned, my husband's a Presbyterian minister, and there would be all sorts of hell to pay if they started serving wine at our service.
Whatever you said there.
Many people want to see a wine line go along. There's no doubt about it. So here,
Yeah.
a Catholic priest gets excommunicated because of serving wine. We get in trouble for serving wine. It really begs the question, like, who's right? I think, if we mix it all up and start again and look at our hearts, and my understanding is that the term communion means coming together, bringing together those folks who want to share in from a Christ perspective or Christ consciousness perspective. It's my understanding that it doesn't turn anyone away.
Oh, yeah, it's funny. It's the petty things when you get you get in the presence of God. He doesn't care whether you're drinking wine or grape juice. It's funny. But I do want to, well, you brought up the word communion, and I just want to take this moment to clarify and talk about the communion of saints. The word communion, actually, the root word means to participate in. And that's the word community. You participate. And when you communicate, or communication, you participate in a relationship. So basically what the communion of saints is, and many people are familiar with something called the Apostles' Creed, and in it you say, I believe in the communion of saints. So the communion of saints is basically the cosmology of the church. So, and it says that the church exists in 3 states, or I prefer to call dimensions, and we call these states or dimensions earth, purgatory, and heaven. And through this church teaching, they recognize that there's this ongoing relationship between the people in earth and the people in heaven or purgatory. And you know, we can pray for people in purgatory, or pray for people in heaven, and vice versa, and ask for favors. So the church, recognizes this eternal relationship between the living and the dead through the doctrine of the communion of saints. But the other misnomer is, many people think that saints just refers to the canonized saints, like St. Anthony. But the word saint, actually, the roots to the communion of saints goes back to Judaism. It really just means holy. And the first Christians were all called saints. So in the first, 10, 20 years, or actually first 100 years of Christianity, all the living followers of Christ were called saints. But then as they started dying and they went to heaven, well, they were still saints, only now it was thought that your relatives could grant you favors because they were closer to God. So they started praying and communicating. So there was always this relationship between the living and the dead, and that's what the communion of saints. That's where the contradiction comes in. You have this beautiful church doctrine and this relationship with the saints, so why not embrace that and utilize it? And the problem is that, it has to do with fear and control, and they don't want us, you could talk to the saints, but you don't want them talking back. So to me, if you're going to believe in the communion of saints, doesn't it follow that you would practice communion or communication with the saints? And if so, what is the methodology? There's none there, so I created one.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about your journey? So you had been doing research in this book, and apparently there were other priests who came to your aid in a sense in terms of editing your book and helping you with church history. That's an interesting part of your journey. But where, kind of like to Misty's question, where did this land for you to be able to live in a way that serves you, that comforts you, as religion is supposed to do, faith is supposed to do? So I guess the first part of that is the priests that got very involved in your book, and you actually do have a Catholic publisher, so
Yes.
for grabs.
Yeah, so your question is?
About tell us about how the priests, and were they comfortable coming to work with you when they know you had been officially, unofficially excommunicated, to help you with your book?
Okay, well, one of my mentor, person that is passed on, but still my mentor, it was a Catholic priest, a Franciscan, parapsychologist, exorcist, and professor at St. Bonaventure University in Olean, New York. Now, my brother's a professor there, and at that time I was looking for priests to interview for the book and ask them about the Communion of Saints. And my brother says, well, you better interview Father Al. His name is Father Alphonsus Trebold, and he's in his 70s at the time. He said, so you better interview him pretty quick because he's old. So I did. I set up an appointment to interview him at St. Bonaventure, which is only like 2 hours from my home in the southern tier of New York. Lovely Catholic school, university. And I interviewed him, and I was amazed. I'm like, how do you get to teach parapsychology, be an exorcist, teach this at a Catholic school? How do you get to do this? And he just said, you know, I just do it. And he pointed me to books and doctrines, and you know, he shared with me a lot. He even shared with me, of course, the syllabuses that were helpful in my research. But yeah, here was a Catholic priest that was talking about the paranormal at a university. He did it under the auspices of comparative religion, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, so he was really my mentor, and so I interviewed him before. The most interesting thing, I interviewed him before he passed away, and then after he passed away, I interviewed him again through the help of a bishop friend of mine, another priest who was also a medium. And this medium priest friend of mine was very clairvoyant, and I'm more clairaudient. So as we interviewed Father Al, he was getting the pictures, and I'm getting the audio. So between the two of us, we were putting the messages together. But very interesting. The message, though, was I asked Father Al, after he crossed over, now that you're on the other side, tell me about the Communion of Saints. How does this work? And he said to me, and this was, you know, the story between the two of us we put together, which is all in the book, is he said, you know, he loved being a priest, but now he actually loves his role even more because he can do it more so on the other side. He says, you know what it's like? He showed a vision of a mother with a child pulling on her skirt to get her attention. When you say a prayer to heaven or to a saint, you get their attention. It's like a little child pulling on a mother's skirt to get their attention. But if a whole bunch of children are around the mother pulling on their skirt, you're going to get even more attention, right? In the same way, if you've got a lot of people praying for one person or praying two person, you're going to get more attention. So prayers amplify. Your prayers are amplified to heaven, and they go to, you know, the saints and angels, and they get, so you want God's attention, the more emotional or fervent your prayer is, it also amplifies it. So the more heartfelt or the more people you get praying, it gets God's attention through the saints. Or it can be your grandmother. You know, I say saints being anyone.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love the connection to feeling, because I've heard, you know, learn that when have the strong, it's one thing, you know, people talk a lot about manifestation and prayer, and, you know, these are all connected. It's the blend of science and spirituality coming. So you can think something and have the intention and see the prayer, but I love how you brought up that when we bring the feeling into it, when we're really feeling that deep need, when we're feeling that loneliness, the sadness, the grief, even if it's anger, I think when we turn to something higher with our feeling, our raw emotion, I like how I can relate to that, because and I think that's a beautiful take home, because often growing up as children and as more so as adults, the emotional side of life is often negated. You know, stop crying, or that's okay, or, you know, don't be sad, or, you know, like happiness is the emotion that's all right and accepted and where everyone should be. And if you're outside of that line, it's like, well, you know, it's almost like death. Not too many people want to talk about it or explore it, or so for me, this is a really big take home, is that, you know, those emotions are part of the human experience, and And this is when, possibly, you know, from according to you, Mary Grace, and your receivers and your, you know, true, is that this is when our prayers are heard loudest, is when we go to them, when we're feeling our human emotion, and that's coming through. And that's, from my perspective, that's our internal guidance system. When we're having those strong emotions, it's like this is a call out and saying, hey, there's something going on here, there's something not right, and this is an opportunity for healing. So thanks for sharing that. I have a question, or would you like to respond to that before I go on?
Well, I was just going to mention, you mentioned healing, and I just want to say that's what this work is all about. I say my mission, there's threefold to my mission, and number one is I teach people that anyone can learn to stay connected with loved ones in spirit, because we all have psychic ability or sixth sense. And my second part of my mission is to teach not only how to stay connected, but the importance of doing so, because this is where healing takes place, healing that is needed when we're grieving the loss of a loved one. And the third part of my mission is to teach that the paranormal, practicing or participating in the paranormal or supernatural, is not an evil force of the devil. It is a natural, God-given gift that can be better understood through the science of parapsychology. So, like you said, it is about healing. It's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Very well said.
Yeah. My question around that was, my follow-up question was, you've touched on it, but how can people stay connected to loved ones in heaven? And I can share a story about that, and what you've shared has really grounded it for me. So I'll just share my little story, and then I'd like to hear your advice
Great.
on how we can stay connected. So when I was a little girl, I was 6 years old, and I lived in the north, in the Canadian Arctic, and the north is 60 until I was 6, and we moved south to a suburb of Vancouver. And on weekends, we used to go to Cultus Lake out in Chilliwack, about an hour or so out of Vancouver. And while at the lake, my mom used to tell me this story. She said, you used to go and sit with this big old Indian on the bench near the lake. And she said you would sit there and talk to him for hours. And I have no idea what you talked about, but you really enjoyed this. So, and as I grew older, I learned that this big old Indian was Chief Dan George, who's a lovely poet. He published some great books, and he was also an actor. He was in Little Big Men and in a few other of these early movies that featured First Nations actors. So, when I kind of forgotten about that for many years, and then I was doing some of my own healing work and just really having a close look at my life and who were my influencers. And I remembered Chief Dan George. And so after that, I started kind of connecting with him, however that would be. You know, if I was seeking in trouble or seeking assistance or praying or whatever I call it, I would think of him. And since I've done that, I feel our connection has grown stronger. And for me, he helps me with connection to the earth and connection to the natural world and all the things that he stands for. So that's my little story about that.
Wow. Have you ever? Is he still alive?
No, he's passed on.
Have you ever gotten a sign or message from him?
Well, I think the fact that I remembered him and that, you know, I got his books, and sometimes he just, you know, his image or a memory, or so he's just around. Like, it's just, oh, okay. And I think of him, and it's almost as if I'm, you know, I'm grounded. He really acts as a grounding force, because, you know, he's this big, solid First Nations, you know, man, and he has such a gentle, loving heart. So for me, he's kind of like my cornerstone, or so a grounded energy. So he, I mean, it's for me. This is pretty new. All the stuff we talk about on the death checks, I'm very open to it, uh, but I don't quite have the language to explain it. So I'm not. I don't know
Okay,
if
let
I've had
me.
a paranormal experience, but
Yeah.
I know he's.
But it sounds like a presence, Misty. It sounds like that might be one of the signs, that feeling the presence, because I think not everybody is visual or auditory, but if you're sensing a presence, then maybe that's a sign. And in fact, Mary Grace, am I to understand that you either teach a course or share spiritual sign language so that we can all understand when that's happening?
Yes, I was just Misty asked a question about how we can stay connected, and I have a very simple exercise you can do. And Misty, you did have an after-death communication. The fact that you said you know he's around is a sign. And I'll explain that. I think it'll become clearer when I explain this little exercise. So I'm going to do a little exercise, and I'm going to ask Missy and Patty to participate. And this is something that everyone can do that's watching. And just a simple way how to stay connected. So Misty and Patty, I'm going to ask you each, think of a loved one that you would like to connect with. And you can tell me who it is so that for reference, like say your mom or whoever. Okay, Patty, who is this for you?
I'd say my mom.
Ma'am, let's okay, Misty, do you have one? We
My
want to do
mom.
Chief Dan? Your mom, okay.
We could.
All right, now.
Yeah, let's see if we already called him in, so he's probably here. Okay.
Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to think, Patty, you're going to think about your mom. Think about the things that she really liked, her passion in life. What were her hobbies or interests, things that she just loved to do that kind of defined her? Now, can you mention a couple of things that she really liked to do? Or collections are a big one, too. What did she like?
I can. My mom was very into classical music and opera. She was a social worker, so she was very interested in. She started a shelter and a food bank in our neighborhood. She was a people collector, and she loved theater and movies.
Okay. Now, I'm going to start getting specific on the questions, because the more specific, the better. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a sign for you, for your mom. And music is a really good one, music or your theater. Now, did she have a favorite song, a classical music song, a favorite theater show, a favorite in that area, genre?
It was probably Viennese waltzes.
Viennese waltzes. Okay, that's pretty specific. Okay, you would know it if you heard it.
I would know it.
Okay, all right. So this is what you're going to do, and we'll do the same thing. Well, why don't we go to Misty right now?
Okay.
Okay, let's ask Misty the same question. Are you popping up, Misty, or not?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so Misty, you're going to connect with, you decided, Chief?
Chief Dan George, yeah.
Okay, and what was his favorite hobbies or interests? I mean, you could just say a Native American would be or not Native Canadian, I guess. But did he have, I don't know how well you knew him.
Well, he was connected to the animals and the earth and the natural world, and yeah, just noticing and observing, like his poetry. I know him. I probably know him best through his poetry, and it's just a simple talk about the natural world that feels really great.
Okay. Does anything stick in mind, like a favorite poem, an animal totem, or anything very specific about him?
Water and trees.
Okay. You might want to be more specific than that. Okay, but all right, we'll go back to Patty. So the next step is this. Tonight, you're laying in bed, okay? You're gonna close your eyes and meditate, maybe put on some nice music or whatever. But just as you're laying in bed, right before you go to sleep, you're gonna call. Patty's gonna call on your mom. Call her name out 3 times, okay? So whoever it is, I kind of like the idea of saying it 3 times. You can say it out loud. You can say it silently. And say, please, Mom, I want a sign from you, and I want the sign to be the Vietnamese waltz, okay? Now, and then you're going to be open within the next week or two or a few days as to how this sign comes. Now, it might be something you hear on the radio, TV. It might be something you see on a billboard. It might be come in a variety of ways. It might be something you read in the book. So just kind of be open as to how it comes. And then when you get this sign, this is what you're going to do. You're going to look for several things to happen, okay? We're going to look for 4 things to happen. You get the physical sign, and for Misty it might be a trees or Native American. I'm going to go Native American with her. You get the physical sign, so you hear the waltz. And then what's going to happen is something physical, the second part, is going to happen to your body. You're going to start either feeling a presence. You might look and see the hair on your arm stand up, feel a tickling in the back of your neck, feel like somebody's touching you. When you feel a presence, what that means is you're feeling their electromagnetic energy, okay? So you're going to feel a presence. It's the second part. Part 3 is you're going to get what I call the just knowing. Now, this is going to be your mom yelling at you telepathically, "It's me, it's me, it's Mom. I'm playing the Vietnamese waltz for you." And you're going to get this, and it's going to be so strong that no one is ever going to convince you otherwise that it is not your mom. And this is your telepathic, intuitively, you're going to know. And then the 4th thing to look for is usually you will become emotional. You might have tears. It might be tears of grief. It might be tears of joy. You'll be emotional. It often depends on how long the person has passed, okay? And usually you're left with a sense of peace. So those are the things, just a simple thing. Set up a sign, because the closer you are, the more emotionally you are closer with another person. The emotional bond creates a psychic bond, and that lays the foundation for telepathic communication and after-death communication. So, Misty, the same thing for you. Now, with all that said and done, we got very specific, and I'll give you a couple other examples. If the person liked gardening, what was their favorite flower? What was, if the person liked movies, what was their favorite movie? That type of thing. Favorite sports team. I have a whole list in the book. So, with all that said and done, I say sometimes you might get a totally different sign. You'll get a totally different sign. It won't be that one. But you'll get the other things. You'll know, you'll get the just knowing, you'll feel the presence. So it might be a different physical sign, but it'll be something that you connect with the person that you are trying to set up a sign with. So the whole idea is that anyone can stay connected with loved ones in heaven. You don't have to go spend hours and years in meditation and classes to learn how to do this. Do it through simple, what I call spiritual sign language, or what's called after-death communication. It's a form of two-way communication. Animals are a big one. A lot of times people will see birds, animals that act out of the norm, out of the ordinary. Birds that come and sit near you, or a butterfly that sits on your shoulder. Rainbows. And the foundation of my work is based on Bill Guggenheim and his wife's book, Hello from Heaven. That was one of the first books I read, and it talks there about after-death communication and all the different signs and ways that our loved ones can get in touch with us. Smelling an odor is another big one. Smelling a perfume or cigarettes, and all these different ways that I have just a whole list of things in the book, all the different ways that our loved ones can give us signs. Appliances that go off and on by themselves. Their picture falls off the wall, or that type of thing. So all that happens.
That actually, my dad does a lot of picture stuff. This morning, there was a picture. Well, one time I was with some girlfriends, and a picture that had a wire background on it leapt. I don't know. It came off the wall, and I had some friends there who were rather psychic, and they checked in. I didn't even really know, and they both looked at me and they said, "Your dad is here." This morning. I looked at, and my dad shows up sometimes when he's not invited. This morning I looked at, my father was an attorney, and I had this picture of a barrister from England, and I looked at it, I go by it all the time, I looked at it today, and it was totally cockeyed. And I just think that it is amazing that he was there. And there's this is Dagmar, who's going to show up for me in all sorts of other ways. So,
oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is, it's just that these things are happening all the time to everyone, and it's just becoming aware. So it's all about education and learning. And when people learn about the different ways that our loved ones are trying to get a hold of us, and you're open and not afraid, and then you're looking for it, and you understand it better. And I always think it's important to, if you know someone that you can share your experiences with. Usually I ask in my classes or when I'm doing presentations, how many people here have had a paranormal experience, something they couldn't explain, or an after-death communication from a particular loved one. Nearly everyone raises their hand. So this is just, I encourage people, a lot of people are afraid to share that. They don't want people to think they're crazy or they're evil or whatever. But when you share your story with someone else, when I had that first experience with my mother, I started sharing it with my brothers and sisters, and they all had stories too. But if I hadn't initiated that sharing, no one would have shared their stories. So when you share your story, then you have the ripple effect, and it goes out, and you plant the seed. And that seed is just sown, and it affects other people. And I'll tell you, a really great icebreaker at a party, you're going to party, especially if someone's there that just recently lost a loved one, okay? You're at a gathering and someone's lost a loved one. You're kind of in the corner. They're not feeling real social. And I'll go up to them when there's one-on-one, not a group of people, when you're one-on-one, and get them alone and say, so, have you heard from your so-and-so lately? Like, you know,
Right.
the person that just died. And they're like looking at me like, what do you mean? They're dead. You know, I'm like, I know. So have you gotten any signs? And inevitably, they just go into like a 15-minute dissertation about something that's happened. And they don't share that. But, you know, go up and ask somebody that. And it just really opens the door.
That's such a good point, because Misty, I love your line when you say, you know, death is like what was like sex was in the 50s. This is Misty's line. I give her all the credit. Death is like sex was in the 50s. Everybody's doing it, but nobody's talking about it. So
I never heard that one.
Well, that's a good one. And so to go up to a party when everybody else is either averting their eyes or turning away or saying, I'm so sorry, what a wonderful icebreaker to be able to say to somebody, which cuts through all that clutter and all that convention, which is probably causing some of the depression to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
What a wonderful sign, or what a wonderful thing to say. I also wanted to mention, because I noticed that we're here at the top of the hour, I wanted to mention that, you know what, Mary Grace, you are a living example of living through something that many people would have a very hard time. And being obviously the independent thinker that you are able to take an experience and move that into something, as you said, an expansion, an expanded experience. And now you consider yourself an expanded Catholic. I think that's beautiful. I know we're coming up to the top of the hour. Misty, I wondered if you would want to do any shout-outs to anybody.
And I also, before wanted to mention my book.
Oh, we're going to get to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So John Jerkowitz, Heidi Hornline, Laura Martino. Let's see, who else do we have here? Julie, or we love you too, Julie. Candy and Charles. I'm not going to try your last name, Candy. Ross Betts. Randy couldn't make it today. Sandra Camacho, Conifer Cummings Sandra, and she's going to watch later. Let's see. Oh, Carmen's one of our new viewers, and she keeps coming back. Scott, thank you very much for being here. Scott's been helping us out since the beginning, even before we started. Scott was my right-hand man. Thank you very much, Scott. Look at us now. We're really doing it. And Mary Grace, it's been really wonderful to have you. And one of the things you just mentioned was that having these conversations kind of like allows people's minds to open up. And really what you said a few minutes ago, I was thinking, that's exactly what Patty and I are doing. That's exactly what the Death Chicks are about. We're about talking about things that people don't talk about. So thank you for sharing that. And there's one thing I have to add. You know, when I remembered Chief Dan George, and I said, okay, so I was this little 6-year-old girl, and I used to be a big Indian, and was this big Indian. Well, I realized, my goodness, like, you know, that's an East Indian, and, you know, these are First Nations people, but when I was 6 years old, we didn't have these politically correct terms. So I had reverted into my little 6-year-old when I was talking about the big Indian. So if I offended anyone out there, that's what was going on there, and I just wanted to bring that up. And the last thing I do need to say before we head out, and we will do a round to share what's coming up and to share if we have things going on, and then direct people to where they can get in touch. I want to bring up The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, and this has been our death book for the Death Book Club this round 2. We started this. And I'm really happy Mary Grace has read this book, and I hope you'll join us next week. I think you may have said you have a commitment, but if you can, join us next week. Will be our show where we discuss this book, and we're going to have jumpers. So if you've read this book, or even if you haven't read this book but want to join the conversation and comment about communications with people who have passed on, next week's show will be where that is happening. And I have a little excerpt, and then we'll do our last goodbyes before we roll out. So this is just a sweet piece. It connects however you want it to connect. Each person, so this is Billy talking, when Billy's dead. Each person is an instrument of the divine, composing cosmic symphonies while on earth. Some of the music is melodic, some discordant, some bright and upbeat, some slow and melancholy. No matter. Each piece will be part of your own serenade in the afterlife. All your efforts, your ups and downs, will be a mystical tune you didn't realize you were humming.
Oh, beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And Misty, I think that's beautiful. And I love your big Indian story coming from a 6-year-old little girl. That's what it probably felt like. So I know nobody takes that as any disrespect whatsoever. I did want to a little note from Julie just to say that, let me share this with you. Julie says, stories make the world go round. My after-death visitation was a profoundly transforming experience, and I appreciate what Mary Grace has done with her own experience and expansion of her spirituality and religious practice. Right.
Thank you so much, Julie. I really appreciate that. It means a lot.
And lots of other people offering shout-outs. Okay, now I can't seem to get that one off. What did I do there?
It should be good now, Patty.
Oh, there. Okay, that was you? Oh, that's still me.
So thanks, Laura. And Dave Williams. He's I think Dave's a new. Dave's a new.
Hi, Dave.
And show. Thanks for being here, Dave. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your support. Come on back.
That's great. And oh, there it is. Whoops, are you there?
I'm here, yeah.
We're having fun now, aren't we? Yeah, okay, well, let's do a wrap. My hour's up and my bladder's full. So Patty, let's start with Mary Grace. Mary Grace, yeah. What do you show us your book, dear? Show us your book.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I keep getting a white screen with the comments, but in case, can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay.
Just
okay. I can't see you right now.
There we go.
My book, The Communion of Saints, Talking to God and Grandma, it's only available right now through my website, www.giftsofgraceministry.org. There's a link directly to my publisher, and they will send you a copy. And it's like $23 with shipping and handling. I just want to say I modeled the book after the Idiot's Guides. I love those Idiot's Guides to spirit communication or whatever. It's in 3 parts. Part 1 is about my spiritual journey and why I wrote the book, and my near-death experiences in there in detail, the story about my mom. Part 2 is kind of the educational part of it. Talks about parapsychology, Christian theology, modern-day spiritualism, the history of the Communion of Saints. And the book, throughout the book, there are many stories of the paranormal in the lives of the saints, as well as modern-day mystics and mediums and the average layperson I interviewed. So, and part 3 is your self-help guide, step-by-step instructions on how to communicate with loved ones in heaven, along with guided meditations. So, again, I can give my email address out and phone number. My email address is mgrace-888@outlook.com, and you just connect there to get my phone number and to order the book. And I'd be happy to take any questions if you have anything to email me, and I just look forward to hearing back from you and your feedback. Thank you so much, Patty, for having me. And Misty, I really appreciate this opportunity. It's been fun.
It's been great. It's been great. And just to show you, for your first video experience, you did beautifully. And hopefully you can use this video again as well. And I want to share, too, that we have your link in our notes here on this event page.
Oh, and great.
Anybody can get in touch with us to get more information from you if for some reason you can't get directly. And Mary Grace is now a member of the Google community with her Google Plus page. And me, Patty Burgess, what's coming up is I'm going to be talking to Dagmar, my mom.
Okay.
Just a little bit, and I'll let you know how that experience.
Okay, you let me know. I hope everyone's trying it, and if you get a sign, let me know.
I will. She was bigger than life, so I'm sure I'm going to start getting signs now that the floodgates are open. Yeah. Come visit me at doingdeathdifferently.com. What I do, and it's an interesting mix with what Misty does, I get people ready for end of life. I have an online video-based, very engaging, experiential 30-hour certification program for helping people be with those at the end of life. If you're a mental health professional, you're a death doula, you're someone who's just really drawn to this work, this could be a wonderful course for you. So I get people ready for end of life, and Misty takes it away after that. The continuum continues.
If you haven't done your work with Patty and you have a loved one who's passed and you're experiencing loss and maybe there wasn't resolution or maybe you have guilt or fear, unresolved stuff, I work with people and bring them back to their place of peace. I connect them with I call it the inner divine, and then once we have that connection, really everything is fine. And a lot of the work I do is on overcoming fears, and I have on my website bittersweetblessing.com. It's bittersweet blessing because I really feel that every challenge that we encounter is really a blessing in disguise. It's an opportunity given to us by Source, God, whatever you call it, to step higher and to realize that no matter what our loss or challenge, our life on earth is precious, and really we're here just to climb the rungs of those ladders and reach deep and connect with our best selves and keep stepping it up and keep seeing the joy and beauty that's all around us and open to us. So bittersweetblessing.com, and I think it's under the live events or live shows tab. You can access it. There's a little free mini course, Overcoming Fear. So have fun with that. And there was one thing I wanted to say about our guest, Mary Grace. Mary Grace, she's new to Google Plus, so I'm just going to do a little reminder. The comment stream on this event page will always be here. So viewers, if you have any questions directly for Mary Grace, you can also ask them here, and Mary Grace, you can come back here and check, and I think you'll get notification if someone comments. So check back here, and that's another place that you can interact, is right here on our event page. So thank you very much. And yes, okay, one more thing, and before, I just want to give a quick shout out to Sheila Hensley. Sheila says, I was lurking while working. Great show, ladies. Very interesting and helpful. Thank you, Sheila. Sheila's been our behind-the-scenes back-end lady when we've been caught in a Google Gremlin pinch. So thanks so much for tuning in, Sheila. And Mary Grace, go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, I do send out a newsletter every other month that features an inspirational story. If you're interested in receiving my newsletter, this latest one was on pet loss. Anyone that's lost a pet would like it. And so you would just have to email me and request to be on my newsletter list. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary Grace. What a thrill to have you. I think you were very valuable to so many people, not only the listeners, but the people who are going to ultimately watch this program in the replay. So thank you for the good works you do, and we wish you well. Many blessings. We'll be talking with you.
Thank you so much, Patty, Misty.
Bye, Misty. Bye. Let's see you soon. Bye.